The massive space station hung in the dark void above Proxima 7 like a glittering jewel. It was the largest structure ever built by the combined races of the galaxy. Inside its walls, representatives from hundreds of alien species gathered to discuss matters that affected entire star systems. Today, the main council chamber was packed with delegates, all waiting to hear what the humans had to say. Ambassador Timon stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the enormous circular room. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes that had seen too much in his 50 years of life. His simple blue uniform marked him as Earth's representative. Next to him stood Jin, a brilliant scientist with short black hair and glasses that reflected the holographic displays floating around them. She carried a data tablet containing information that she hoped would make the council understand the gravity of their situation. Around them, the council members sat in their designated sections. The chamber was designed so that every species could see the speaker clearly. Some aliens were massive creatures that needed special reinforced seating. Others were so small they sat in groups on shared platforms. The air processing systems worked overtime to provide comfortable breathing conditions for everyone, creating a slight hum that never quite disappeared. Taemin looked up at the council leader, a being from the Keltheran species. The Keltheran looked like a mix between an octopus and a dragon, with multiple tentacles and scaled skin that shimmered with colors humans had no names for. The council leader's three eyes focused on Taemin with what appeared to be boredom. Ambassador Taemin of Earth, the council leader spoke through the translation devices that made communication possible. You have requested this emergency session. The council has agreed to hear your complaint. You may begin. Taemin took a deep breath. He had practiced this speech for weeks, but now that the moment had arrived, he felt the weight of his world on his shoulders. Behind him, projected on the massive view screens, images of human colony worlds appeared. Peaceful farming communities, research stations, mining operations where humans work to build new homes far from Earth. Honored council members, Taemin began, his voice steady and clear. For 3 years, humanity has brought complaints to this council about attacks on our colonies. The Vrothian Empire has raided 17 of our settlements. They have stolen our resources, destroyed our infrastructure, and killed our people. Each time we have asked for your intervention. Each time, you have told us to be patient, to wait for investigations, to trust in the council's wisdom. Murmurs spread through the chamber. In the Vrothian section, the massive warriors shifted in their seats. They were a powerful race, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick armor-like skin and 4 powerful arms. Their commander, a scarred veteran whose name translated roughly to Stormbreaker, laughed loudly enough for everyone to hear. The humans complain again. Stormbreaker's voice boomed across the chamber. Their colonies sit on resource-rich worlds that they cannot properly defend or utilize. By galactic law, stronger species have the right to claim what weaker species cannot hold. This is how it has always been. Several other species nodded in agreement. The galaxy operated on principles that humans found difficult to accept. Strength mattered more than justice. Military power determined rights more than moral arguments. Taemin waited for the noise to settle. He had expected this response. Hyojin touched her tablet and new images appeared on the screens. These showed burning buildings, destroyed farms, and worst of all, the bodies of colonists who had tried to defend their homes. We understand galactic law. Taemin continued. We understand that might makes right in this part of the universe. But we have come here today not to appeal to your sense of justice. We have come to give you a warning. This caused more murmurs. The council leader's tentacles twitched with what might have been amusement. A warning? The council leader asked. The humans presume to warn the Galactic Council? This is most unusual. Taemin nodded to Hyojin. She stepped forward and began her presentation. The screens changed again, this time showing images from Earth's history. Ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval wars with castles and sieges, then more modern conflicts with guns and tanks. Finally, the images that made even the alien observers pause. Mushroom clouds rising over cities. Entire landscapes turned to radioactive wastelands. Billions of dead in wars that nearly destroyed humanity's home planet. This is our history, Hyojin explained, her voice quiet but firm. Humans are not naturally peaceful. We are not weak. We are not defenseless. For thousands of years, we killed each other with increasing efficiency. We developed weapons that could end all life on our planet. We came within minutes of using them multiple times. She pulled up more data. Chemical weapons that melted flesh. Biological agents that turned bodies against themselves. Psychological warfare tactics designed to break minds before bodies. The gallery of human violence was extensive and horrifying. We stopped, Heejin continued. Not because we became weak. Not because we forgot how to fight. We stopped because we finally understood the true cost of war. We chose peace because we knew what would happen if we did not. Every human child learns about the great wars. Every human remembers what we almost did to ourselves. Stormbreaker laughed again. So the humans admit they are a violent species trying to pretend it's civilization. This only proves they are dangerous and should be contained or eliminated. You misunderstand, Taman said, and something in his voice made the laughter stop. We are not pretending it's civilization. We achieved it. But we remember what lies underneath. Every human diplomat, every human scientist, every human farmer on those colonies you attack remembers the lessons of our history. We chose to be peaceful. We choose it every day, but it is a choice, not our nature. He walked closer to the center of the platform, looking up at the assembled council members. When humanity joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, we made a decision. We decided to export our best achievements, our art, our music, our philosophy, our science, our medicine. We decided not to export our talent for warfare. Do you know why? The chamber was silent now. Even the translator systems seemed to hold their breath. Because we are very, very good at war, Taman said softly. Better than you can imagine. Better than you want to know. We had 10,000 years to perfect the art of killing our own species. We know every psychological weakness, every tactical advantage, every strategic concept that works on beings who think like we do. And we learned that in a galaxy of different species, those same principles apply with terrifying efficiency. Hyejin brought up one final image. It was a simple memorial on Earth, showing names of the dead from the last Great War. Billions of names carved into black stone. This is why we warn you, Taman said. Not because we want to fight. Not because we are eager to prove ourselves. But because we know what will happen if you force us to remember what we chose to forget. The Vrothian Empire thinks we are weak prey. They think our reluctance to fight means we cannot fight. They are wrong. He turned to look directly at Stormbreaker. We are asking you, begging you to stop the attacks on our colonies. We are asking the Council to enforce the protection agreements that brought us into this union. We are asking for peace not because we need it, but because you do. The Council leaders' tentacles moved in complex patterns. The humans make dramatic speeches, but words are not power. The Vrothians have superior military forces. They have conquered 17 species in the last century. What makes you think you could resist them? Taman closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, there was a sadness there that made Heejin want to look away. We do not think we could resist them, Taman said quietly. We know we could destroy them, completely, utterly, and that knowledge keeps me awake at night because I remember our history. I remember what happens when humans go to war. Please, honored Council, please do not make us show you what we are capable of. The Council leader called for a vote. The debate lasted 3 hours. Species argued about human rights, about Vrothian expansion, about territorial claims and resource management. In the end, the vote was not even close. The Council decided that the Vrothian Empire had legitimate claims to the contested colonies. They ruled that humans should either defend their territory or abandon it to stronger species. As Taman and Hyejin walked back to their shuttle, she asked him the question that had been bothering her since the vote. Do you think they understood what you were trying to tell them? Taman looked out at the stars through the station's massive windows. Somewhere out there, human colonists were sleeping, unaware that the Council had just given their enemies permission to continue the attacks. No, he said finally. They did not understand. They think we were bluffing or exaggerating. They think our warnings were the desperate threats of a weak species trying to seem dangerous. What do we do now? Heejin asked. Taman touched his communication device and sent a coded message back to Earth. It was a short message, just 3 words. They did not listen. Now, he said quietly, we prepare for what comes next. And we pray that when it is over, there is still a galaxy worth saving. They boarded their shuttle and left the station. Behind them, the 3 months passed since the Council's decision. Captain Jiwoo sat in the command chair of the patrol vessel Indomitable, watching the stars streak past as his ship traveled through deep space. He was a young captain, only 32 years old, but he had earned his position through skill and dedication. His crew respected him because he cared about them and always made smart decisions. The Indomitable was not a warship. It was designed for patrol duties, checking on colonies and making sure trade routes stayed safe. Jedju preferred it that way. He had joined the space service to explore and protect, not to fight. His weapon systems were mostly for show, meant to scare off pirates and small threats. The communication officer, a young woman named HFY, suddenly sat up straight at her station. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from New Jedju colony." Jedju felt his stomach tighten. New Jedju was one of the farming colonies that the Vrothians had been threatening. It was also special to Jedju for a personal reason. His younger sister Yunha lived there with her husband and 2 children. She had moved to New Jedju 5 years ago to start a new life as a farmer. "Put it through," Jedju ordered. The speakers crackled with static, and then a terrified voice came through. "This is New Jedju. We are under attack." Vrothian ships appeared without warning. "They are firing on civilian targets. They are not accepting our surrender. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help immediately." The transmission ended with the sound of an explosion. "How far are we from New Jedju?" Jedju asked, already knowing he would not like the answer. 2 hours at maximum speed, the navigator replied. "Get us there now. Push the engines as hard as they can go." The crew moved quickly, following their captain's orders. Jedju tried to contact his sister on her personal communication device, but there was no answer. He tried again and again, each time hearing only silence. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. When the Indomitable finally arrived at New Jedju, what they found made the entire crew fall silent. The planet's orbital stations were destroyed, floating in pieces among the debris. Several Vrothian ships were leaving the system, their weapons still hot from recent firing. They ignored the small human patrol vessel, considering it beneath their notice. Jedju ordered his ship to enter orbit. What he saw on the screens made him feel cold inside. The main settlement was burning. Fields that had been full of crops were now covered in ash. The communication arrays were destroyed. There were no signals coming from the planet's surface. "Scan for life signs," Jedju said quietly. The science officer worked at his console for several minutes. When he looked up, his face was pale. "Captain, I am detecting approximately 300 survivors. The colony population was 50,000. 50,000 people, 49,700 dead." Jedju forced himself to keep breathing, to keep thinking clearly. His sister's family lived on the eastern continent. He checked the scan results. "No life signs in that region. Take us down," he ordered. "We need to help the survivors and find out what happened." The Indomitable landed near the main settlement. Jedju led a team down to the surface. What they found was worse than anything he had imagined. The Vrothians had not just attacked military targets. They had systematically destroyed homes, schools, hospitals, and farms. Bodies lay in the streets where people had been shot while trying to run away. The survivors they found were in shock. An older man named Wu Jin, who had been the colony's administrator, explained what had happened. "They came without warning," Wu Jin said, his voice shaking. "We tried to surrender immediately. We had no weapons, no defenses. They landed anyway. Their soldiers went building to building. They were laughing. They treated it like a game, like hunting animals. When we begged for mercy, they just laughed harder." Jiwoo's medical officer Sung Min was treating the wounded, but there were so few to treat. Most people had died quickly. The Vrothians had been efficient in their cruelty. "Did they take anything?" Jedju asked. "Resources, equipment, anything?" Wu Jin shook his head. "No, they just destroyed everything and left. I think they did this to send a message. To show us what happens when we try to resist their claims on our colonies." Jedju walked through the destroyed settlement, his team following silently. He found his sister's home on the eastern edge of the colony. The building had been hit by weapons fire. Inside, he found what he had been dreading. Yunha lay near the door, her husband beside her. They had died trying to protect their children, but it had not been enough. He knelt beside his sister's body. She looked peaceful, as if she was just sleeping. Jedju had not cried in 10 years, not since their mother's funeral. But now tears ran down his face as he held Yunha's cold hand. His second officer, a man named Jae-ho, found him there an hour later. "Captain, we have recovered surveillance footage from the settlement's backup servers. You need to see this." Jedju carefully laid his sister's hand back down and stood up. He followed Jae-ho back to the ship. In the briefing room, the crew had already gathered. They played the footage on the main screen. The video showed Vrothian soldiers moving through the colony. They were not fighting an enemy. They were executing unarmed civilians for sport. The footage showed them placing bets on how many humans they could kill with single shots. It showed them laughing as children ran screaming from their destroyed homes. It showed Stormbreaker himself overseeing the attack, giving orders to make sure every building was destroyed. The crew watched in complete silence. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long moment. "Copy everything," Jedju said, his voice completely calm now. "Every piece of data, every surveillance recording, every communication log. Send it all to Earth Command using our highest priority emergency channels. Market urgent attention to Defense Minister Sujin." "Captain," HFY said quietly, "should we also send a formal complaint to the Galactic Council?" Jedju looked at the blank screen where the horrible footage had been playing. "Yes, send it to them too. But I do not think they will care. They made their choice 3 months ago." The transmission was sent. Jedju and his crew worked for 3 days helping the survivors and documenting everything they found. They buried as many of the dead as they could, including Unha and her family. The survivors were evacuated to other human colonies where they would be safe. On Earth, Defense Minister Sujin received the transmission in the middle of the night. She was a stern woman in her 60s who had served in Earth's military for 40 years before moving into government. She watched the footage from New Jedju with growing anger. By the time it finished, she had already made several calls. Within hours, the Emergency Defense Council convened in the secure chambers beneath Earth's capital. Military leaders, government officials, and intelligence directors gathered around a conference table. The footage from New Jedju played on screens around the room. President Dong-hyun sat at the head of the table. He was 70 years old, a veteran of Earth's last major conflict decades ago. He had spent his entire presidency working for peace, trying to prove that humanity had evolved beyond its violent past. Now he watched evidence that his peaceful approach had failed to protect his people. "Options," he said simply. Defense Minister Sujin stood up. "The Vrothian Empire has crossed a line. This was not a military engagement. This was a massacre. They did it deliberately to terrorize us. If we do not respond, they will continue attacking our colonies until we abandon them all or fight back." "The Council will not help us," said Foreign Minister Tae-young. "We asked for their protection and they refused. We are on our own." President Dong-hyun looked at General Young-hee, who had been sitting quietly through the discussion. She was a legend among Earth's military, a tactical genius who had won seemingly impossible battles during the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. She had retired afterward, saying she never wanted to fight again. "General Young-hee," the president said, "you have been silent. What is your assessment?" The old general stood slowly. She was small and thin, but everyone in the room knew her reputation. "We can win," she said simply. "The Vrothians are powerful, but they fight according to galactic standards. We do not have to follow those standards. We have technologies and tactics that we have kept locked away since our unification. If we unseal those archives and use what we know, we can destroy the Vrothian military within 6 months." "At what cost?" the president asked. "That depends on how completely you want to win," Young-hee replied. "If we fight a limited war, trying to be merciful and follow galactic conventions, it will take longer and cost more human lives. If we fight the way humans have always fought when truly threatened, it will be fast and brutal. The galaxy will learn to fear us." President Dong-hyun sat back in his chair. He thought about Ambassador Taemin's warning to the council 3 months ago. He thought about the footage of children dying on New Jedju. He thought about the thousands of colonists depending on Earth to protect them. "We tried peace," he said finally. "We warned them. We begged them to stop. They chose to ignore us and murder our people instead." He looked around the table at each person. "I am authorizing Protocol Wrath. Unseal the military archives. Recall our reserve forces. General Young-hee, you will take command of the First Fleet." Admiral Young-hee stood on the bridge of the warship Retribution, watching the tactical displays that showed her fleet assembling in deep space. 65 ships had gathered under her command in just 2 weeks. These were not the peaceful patrol vessels that humanity had been using for colony protection. These were warships pulled from hidden reserves and modified with technologies that had been forbidden for decades. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. They could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew that what they were about to do would change everything. Humanity was about to show the galaxy its true face. "Admiral, all ships report ready," said Commander Jae-sung, her second in command. He was a serious man in his 40s who had served under Young Hee during the Mars Rebellion. He understood her methods and never questioned her orders. "Set course for Kepler Station," Young Hee ordered. "That is where the Vrothian Forward Command is located. That is where we begin." Kepler Station was a massive military base that the Vrothians had built in neutral space. From there, they coordinated their raids on human colonies. It was defended by 200 Vrothian warships and protected by shield technology, considered the best in the galaxy. According to standard galactic warfare calculations, Young Hee's fleet had no chance of victory, but Young Hee had no intention of fighting a standard galactic battle. The human fleet arrived at Kepler Station exactly 36 hours later. The Vrothian sensors detected them immediately. Stormbreaker himself was at the station, and he laughed when he saw the size of the human fleet. "Only 65 ships," he said to his officers. "The humans are more foolish than I thought. Destroy them quickly so we can return to planning our next raids." The Vrothian fleet moved to engage. They followed standard tactics, forming defensive formations around the station, while their heavy cruisers moved forward to attack. It was a strategy that had worked for them hundreds of times against other species. Then the humans did something unexpected. Instead of engaging the Vrothian fleet directly, they scattered. Ships broke formation and moved in seemingly random directions. The Vrothians tried to follow, confused by the lack of coordinated attack. That was when Young Hee sprang her trap. 20 human ships had positioned themselves near the system's star during the approach. They had been running silent, their heat signatures masked by the star's radiation. Now they activated weapon systems that the galaxy had never seen before. Electromagnetic pulse cannons fired, sending invisible waves of energy across the battlefield. The pulses did not destroy Vrothian ships, but they disabled their shield generators for precisely 8 seconds. 8 seconds was all Young Hee needed. Her main fleet launched missiles that had been guided by AI, calculations so complex that even the human crews did not fully understand them. The missiles moved through space in patterns that seemed impossible, curving around obstacles and adjusting their trajectories in real time. They struck Vrothian ships during the exact 8 seconds when their shields were down. 40 Vrothian warships exploded in the first minute of combat. Stormbreaker stared at his tactical display in shock. "What kind of weapons are these? How did they penetrate our shields?" His weapons officer had no answer. The technology the humans were using was completely unfamiliar. It did not follow any known principles of galactic warfare. Young Hee watched the battle unfold with calm satisfaction. "Deploy the boarding teams," she ordered. From several human ships, small assault craft launched. These were piloted by special operations soldiers like Commander Jae-sung's strike teams. They approached damaged Vrothian vessels and attached to their hulls. Using cutting tools and explosives, they breached the ships and entered. What happened next would become legendary in galactic history. The human soldiers used weapons that did not kill immediately. Neural disruptors sent focused electromagnetic pulses into Vrothian nervous systems, paralyzing them completely while leaving them fully conscious. Vrothian warriors found themselves unable to move, forced to watch as human teams methodically moved through their ships, disabling systems and capturing crew members. One Vrothian captain, paralyzed on his own bridge, watched as a human soldier named Bora calmly walked past him. She was checking each station, downloading data, and moving to the next without any wasted motion. Her face showed no emotion, no anger, no hatred, just cold efficiency. The captain tried to speak, to threaten, to beg, but his paralyzed muscles would not respond. All he could do was watch and feel terror growing in his mind. This was not how galactic warfare worked. Enemies fought with honor, with clear rules about combat. The humans were fighting like something from a nightmare. In space, the battle continued. Pilot Minji flew her fighter through the Vrothian formations in maneuvers that should have killed her. Her ship's AI calculated trajectories that took her within meters of obstacles, using gravity wells and debris fields to create impossible attack angles. She destroyed 3 enemy cruisers before they even understood where the attacks were coming from. When her fighter took damage and her systems began failing, Minji did not retreat. Instead, she aimed her crippled ship directly at a Vrothian command vessel and activated her engines to maximum. Her AI had calculated that the impact would breach their reactor. The Vrothian ship tried to shoot her down, but her erratic trajectory made targeting impossible. The impact destroyed both vessels. But Minji had already ejected in an escape pod milliseconds before collision, following a flight path her AI had planned. Another human ship picked her up 3 hours later. She returned to duty the next day with a new fighter. The Vrothians had never encountered an enemy willing to sacrifice so much for tactical advantage. Their warriors valued personal glory and survival. The humans seemed to value only victory. Within 6 hours, Kepler Station was surrounded. The Vrothian fleet had been reduced to 70 ships, less than half their starting force. Stormbreaker sent an emergency message requesting reinforcements from the Vrothian homeworld. Young Hee intercepted the message. She recorded her own transmission and sent it on all channels so every Vrothian could hear. "This is Admiral Young Hee of the Human Defense Fleet. You attacked our colony. You murdered 50,000 civilians. You laughed while doing it. Now you call for help." Her voice was quiet but cold. "No help is coming. We have blockaded this system. Every ship that tries to leave will be destroyed. Every ship that tries to enter will be destroyed. You wanted to teach humanity a lesson about strength. Now we will teach you about consequences." Stormbreaker roared in fury. "Attack! All ships attack! Show these weak humans what Vrothian strength means." The remaining Vrothian fleet charged forward in a desperate assault. It was exactly what Young Hee had been waiting for. Her ships had been conserving their most powerful weapons. Now she unleashed them. Engineer Haywan had spent 2 weeks preparing Protocol Devastation. It was a weapon system based on nanotechnology that Earth had banned after the Unification Wars. Millions of microscopic machines were released into space so small that Vrothian sensors could not detect them. They attached to enemy ship hulls and began disassembling the molecular bonds in the metal. Vrothian ships simply came apart. Not exploding, not burning, just breaking into smaller and smaller pieces as the nanomachines worked. It was terrifying to watch. Warriors who had faced death bravely in countless battles now screamed in terror as their ships dissolved around them. But Young Hee had programmed the nanomachines carefully. They only attacked military vessels and equipment. Escape pods and life support systems were left intact. The humans were not trying to kill every Vrothian. They were trying to break their will to fight. The psychological effect was devastating. Vrothian warriors abandoned their ships in panic, fleeing to escape pods and surrendering rather than face the invisible weapons that destroyed their vessels. Stormbreaker tried to rally his forces, but fear had already won. On Kepler Station itself, Young Hee sent a message directly to Stormbreaker. "You have 1 hour to evacuate all personnel and surrender the station. If you refuse, we will destroy it with everyone inside. Choose." Stormbreaker had never surrendered in his life. His pride as a Vrothian warrior demanded that he fight to the death. But he looked at his officers, many of them young warriors on their first command. He looked at the remains of his fleet scattered across the system. He looked at the human warships holding position around his station, weapons ready. For the first time in his long military career, Stormbreaker felt true fear. Not fear of death, but fear of an enemy he did not understand. An enemy that fought with such calculated precision that resistance seemed pointless. "Evacuate the station," he ordered quietly. The Vrothians abandoned Kepler Station in an orderly retreat. Young Hee kept her word and allowed them to leave safely. But as their escape ships fled, she sent another message that was broadcast across every communication channel in the sector. The Vrothian Empire declared war on humanity by attacking our defenseless colonies. They thought we were weak because we chose peace. They were wrong. This is just the beginning. Every military installation, every forward base, every warship that participated in attacks on human colonies will be destroyed. We will not stop until the Vrothian Empire kneels and begs for mercy. This is not negotiable. This is not a threat. This is a... The Vrothian fleet assembled at the edge of the Orion Nebula like a wall of steel and fire. 500 warships, the largest military force the Empire had ever gathered in one place. Stormbreaker stood on the bridge of his flagship, the conquering fist watching the tactical displays with grim determination. This would be the battle that decided everything. "The human fleet approaches," his sensor officer reported. "I count 65 vessels." Stormbreaker felt satisfaction flow through him. The humans had won their earlier victories through tricks and surprise. But here in open battle with overwhelming numbers, Vrothian strength would prevail. There was no trickery that could overcome such a difference in force. "All ships battle formation," he commanded. "We will crush them in one decisive strike." The Vrothian fleet moved into their traditional attack pattern. Heavy cruisers in front, destroyers on the flanks, carriers in the rear providing fighter support. It was the formation that had conquered 17 species. It had never failed. Admiral Young Hee watched the Vrothian formation take shape and smiled coldly. "They still do not understand," she said to Commander Jae-sung. "They think this is about numbers. Send the signal." Deep within the Orion Nebula, where radiation was so intense that it scrambled most sensors, 30 human vessels received their orders. They had been hiding there for 3 weeks, their crews enduring daily radiation treatments to counter the damage from their environment. Lieutenant Bora commanded one of those ships, a missile platform that carried weapons capable of striking targets from extreme range. "Finally," Bora said when the orders came through, "I was beginning to think we would die from radiation before getting to fight." Her crew activated their weapon systems. They had been maintaining complete silence, not even running active sensors. Now they lit up like stars as their targeting computers came online. Within seconds, they had firing solutions on the Vrothian rear formations. The first missiles launched from the nebula caught the Vrothians completely by surprise. The rear carrier groups never saw the attack coming. Explosions rippled through their formations as missiles struck with devastating accuracy. 8 carriers were destroyed in the opening salvo, along with their fighter complements. Stormbreaker spun toward his sensor officer. "Where did those attacks come from?" "The nebula, Commander. There are multiple contacts emerging from the radiation clouds." "That is impossible. No crew could survive in that environment for more than a few days." But the evidence was right there on his screens. Human ships emerging from places that should have killed them. Stormbreaker realized with growing dread that the humans had deliberately positioned forces in lethal conditions and simply accepted the cost. What kind of species did that? Young Hee's main fleet engaged the Vrothian front lines, but they did not fight like any enemy the Vrothians had faced before. Human ships moved in coordinated patterns that seemed random, but were actually calculated by quantum computers running millions of tactical simulations per second. They never stayed still, never held formation, never did what the Vrothians expected. Captain Hyunwoo commanded the destroyer Swift Justice. His ship dove under the Vrothian line, launching torpedoes upward into their vulnerable undersides. Before the Vrothians could rotate to engage him, he was already accelerating away. His engines pushed beyond their rated limits. "Engineering reports we are at 130% power," his chief engineer reported. "We cannot maintain this." "We only need to maintain it for another 20 minutes, Hyunwoo replied calmly. "After that, either we win or it does not matter." His engineer nodded and returned to keeping the engines from exploding. This was how humans fought. They pushed everything to the breaking point and beyond, accepting risks that other species would never take. The battle raged for 3 hours. The Vrothian numerical advantage meant nothing, because Young Hee never allowed them to bring their full force to bear. She kept her fleet moving, striking from unexpected angles, forcing the Vrothians to constantly reposition. Their formations broke apart as individual captains tried to respond to threats from multiple directions. Stormbreaker tried to maintain control, but it was like fighting smoke. Every time he gave orders to engage one group of human ships, another group would strike from a different direction. His fleet was larger and more powerful, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to engage in the traditional way. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human flagship," Stormbreaker ordered desperately. "Kill their admiral and the rest will fall apart." 200 Vrothian ships turned their weapons toward the Retribution. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Young Hee watched them come and did not move her ship. "Admiral, we should retreat," Commander Jae-sung said urgently. "We cannot survive that much fire." "We do not need to survive it," Young Hee replied. "We just need to hold their attention. Execute protocol mirror." Every human ship suddenly activated systems that had been installed specifically for this moment. Electromagnetic generators created false sensor signatures, making each human vessel appear in multiple locations at once. The Vrothians found themselves targeting dozens of ghost ships mixed with real vessels. When they fired, most of their shots struck nothing. The few that hit real targets found that the human ships had reinforced their shields for exactly this moment, accepting reduced mobility in exchange for survival. The Retribution took 17 direct hits and survived, its shields collapsing but its hull intact. And while the Vrothians were focusing on the human flagship, Bora's forces in the nebula launched their main assault. Missiles streaked through space, hundreds of them, all targeted at the Vrothian command ships. Stormbreaker's conquering fist was hit by 47 missiles simultaneously. The great warship broke apart, its reactor exploding in a flash of light that temporarily blinded nearby sensors. Stormbreaker managed to reach an escape pod seconds before his ship died. As he fled, he watched his fleet crumbling around him. Without his coordination, individual Vrothian captains made their own decisions. Some fled, some surrendered, some fought on in desperate last stands. The battle was over. Of 500 Vrothian warships, fewer than 100 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured. Young Hee's fleet had lost 12 vessels, but she had broken the Vrothian military completely. Across Vrothian space, the news of the defeat spread rapidly. The Empire's supposedly invincible fleet had been destroyed by a force 1/8 its size. Panic spread through Vrothian colonies. If humanity could do this to their military, what would they do to civilian populations? On Earth, analyst Subin was working on a different kind of warfare. She had spent weeks tracking financial transactions and communications between Galactic Council members and Vrothian officials. What she found was explosive. Dozens of council representatives had accepted bribes from the Vrothians. They had voted to allow Vrothian expansion not because it was legal, but because they were being paid. Subin compiled all the evidence into a detailed report. She included transaction records, intercepted communications, and financial analysis showing exactly how much each corrupt official had received. Then she sent it to every major news organization in the galaxy. The scandal erupted overnight. Council members were arrested on their homeworlds. Governments fell as citizens learned their representatives had sold out humanity for profit. The Galactic Council itself ground to a halt as investigations began into the corruption. The council leader, the Keltheran who had dismissed humanity's warnings 3 months ago, called an emergency session to address the crisis. But when he tried to speak, his own species representatives demanded his resignation. He had taken more bribes than anyone else. Ambassador Taman watched the council's chaos from the gallery. Scientist Heejin sat beside him, both of them observing the political destruction that Subin's revelations had caused. "They are getting what they deserve," Hyejin said quietly. "Perhaps," Taman replied. "But this gives us no joy. We wanted peace, not this." The Galactic Council tried to send a peacekeeping fleet to intervene in the human-Vrothian war. They assembled ships from a dozen species and dispatched them to Vrothian space with orders to enforce a ceasefire. Admiral Young Hee received notification of the peacekeeping fleet's approach. She recorded a message and transmitted it on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Young Hee to the Galactic Council Peacekeeping Force. 3 months ago we asked for your help when Vrothian forces were murdering our civilians. You refused. You told us to accept our weakness or defend ourselves. We chose to defend ourselves. Now that we are winning, you decide to intervene. Your assistance is not wanted and not needed. Turn back, or you will be treated as hostile forces." The peacekeeping fleet stopped at the edge of Vrothian space. Their commanders looked at the wreckage of Vrothian military bases floating in nearby systems and decided that Young Hee was not bluffing. They retreated without firing a shot. The message was clear to everyone in the galaxy. Humanity was not asking for permission anymore. They were not following galactic rules that had failed to protect them. They were fighting their war their way and no one could stop them. Captain Hyunwoo's destroyer was one of the ships tasked with advancing toward the Vrothian homeworld. As they traveled through Vrothian territory, they found colonies that were terrified of what the humans might do. When the 6 months had passed since the massacre at New Jedju, Admiral Young Hee stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking at the view screen that showed the Vrothian homeworld below. Her fleet held position in a perfect blockade formation around the planet. Not a single ship could enter or leave without her permission. The Vrothian military was shattered, their empire broken, their pride destroyed. But the planet itself remained intact. Every city, every farm, every civilian structure untouched by human weapons. This was Young Hee's choice, and it was a choice that terrified the Galactic Council more than any destruction would have. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the surface," Commander Jae-sung reported. "The Vrothian Emperor wishes to speak with you directly." "Put him through," Young Hee ordered. The Emperor's face appeared on the screen. He looked old and tired, nothing like the proud warrior he had been 6 months ago. Behind him, Young He could see his advisors, all of them looking defeated. "Admiral Young He," the Emperor said, his voice quiet, "I am prepared to accept your terms. Complete military disarmament, reparations for the families of those killed at New Jedju, war crimes trials for those who participated in the massacre. All of this I will accept. I ask only that you spare my people further suffering." Young He studied him for a long moment. She felt no satisfaction in his defeat, no joy in his humiliation. She felt only the weight of all the decisions she had made, all the lives lost on both sides, all the destruction that could have been avoided if the Council had listened to Ambassador Taemin's warnings. "Your acceptance is noted," Young He replied. "But this is not a negotiation between you and me. The terms will be presented by our diplomatic corps. What I can tell you is this: humanity does not seek to destroy the Vrothian people. We sought only to stop you from destroying us. That goal has been achieved." The transmission ended. Young He turned to her communications officer. "Inform Earth Command that the Vrothian Empire has indicated willingness to surrender. Request that Ambassador Taemin be sent to negotiate final terms." 3 days later, Ambassador Taemin arrived at the Vrothian homeworld aboard a diplomatic vessel. Scientist Hyejin accompanied him, along with a security detail led by Colonel Wanshik. The colonel was a serious man who had served in special operations during Earth's unification wars. He trusted no one and expected trouble everywhere. "Stay alert," Wanshik told his team as they prepared to shuttle down to the planet's surface. "The Vrothians may be defeated, but desperate enemies are dangerous enemies." The shuttle landed at the Imperial Palace. Vrothian guards stood at attention, their weapons holstered and their heads bowed. They did not meet the eyes of the humans who walked past them. The proud warriors who had terrorized colonies now looked broken and ashamed. Inside the palace, the Vrothian Emperor waited in a simple meeting room. He had set aside his ceremonial armor and wore plain robes. Stormbreaker stood beside him, the once mighty commander now serving as a translator and advisor. The warrior who had laughed at human warnings now looked haunted. Taemin entered the room and sat across from the Emperor. Hyejin set up her data displays, showing detailed documentation of every crime committed against human colonies. Wanshik positioned his security team at strategic points around the room, their weapons ready but not threatening. "Let us begin," Taemin said simply. The negotiations lasted for 8 hours. Taemin presented humanity's demands with calm precision. Complete dismantling of the Vrothian military fleet, with only defensive forces allowed. Reparations totaling 15 trillion galactic credits to be paid over 20 years. War crimes trials for every soldier and officer who participated in attacks on civilian targets. Permanent human monitoring stations in Vrothian space to ensure compliance. The Emperor agreed to everything without argument. He had no choice, but more than that, he seemed to understand that these terms were fair, given what his empire had done. "There is one more thing," Taemin said. "The footage from New Jedju, showing your soldiers executing civilians, will be submitted to the Galactic Council as evidence. The galaxy will know what happened and why humanity responded as we did." Stormbreaker spoke for the first time. "Ambassador, may I ask a question?" Taemin nodded. "Why did you spare our civilians? Your fleet could have bombarded our worlds from orbit. You could have done to us what we did to New Jedju, but on a scale we could never match. Yet you did not. Why?" Taemin looked at the warrior for a long moment. "Because we are not you. We do not murder civilians for sport or to inspire terror. We fight to protect our people and remove threats. Once you were no longer a threat, we had no reason to harm your civilians. That is the difference between us. That is why we warned you not to make us angry." Hyejin added quietly, "We have killed enough of our own species to understand the cost of war. We did not want to add Vrothian civilians to that count unless absolutely necessary. Your military forced us to fight. Your civilians did not." Stormbreaker had no response. He simply bowed his head, finally understanding what Ambassador Taemin had tried to explain to the Council 6 months ago. The treaty was signed that evening. The Vrothian Empire officially surrendered to humanity, accepting all terms without reservation. As Taemin prepared to return to his shuttle, the Emperor stopped him. "Ambassador, one question haunts me. If we had listened to your warning, if the Council had protected your colonies as you asked, would any of this have been necessary?" "No," Taemin replied. "We came to the Council seeking peace. We explained our history and our capabilities because we wanted to avoid exactly what happened. Every death on both sides could have been prevented if the Council had simply enforced their own protection agreements. I will live with that knowledge for the rest of my life, the Emperor said quietly. 2 days later, the Galactic Council convened for the first time since the scandal exposed by analyst Subin. The chamber was half empty. Many representatives had been arrested or forced to resign. The council leader from the Keltheran species was gone, replaced by a younger member of his species who looked nervous and uncertain. Ambassador Taemin stood at the speaker's platform once again, but this time the chamber was silent. Every species watched him with wary respect. Behind him on the screens played footage from New Jedju, shown at humanity's insistence so the full council could see what had started the war. When the footage ended, Taemin spoke. 6 months ago I stood in this chamber and warned you. I explained humanity's history. I begged you to protect our colonies from Vrothian aggression. You voted to allow the attacks to continue. You told us to accept our weakness or defend ourselves. We chose to defend ourselves. He paused, letting the silence stretch. The Vrothian Empire has surrendered unconditionally. Their military has been dismantled. They will pay reparations for their crimes. Justice has been served, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of humans died at New Jedju. Tens of thousands of Vrothian soldiers died in the war that followed. All of this could have been prevented. The new interim council leader spoke hesitantly. Ambassador Taemin, the council recognizes that we failed in our duty to protect your colonies. We acknowledge the corruption that influenced our decision. We ask, what does humanity want from the council now? Taemin touched his datapad and new images appeared on the screens. These showed the proposed reforms that Earth's government had prepared. We want 3 things, Taemin said. First, complete reform of council voting procedures to prevent bribery and corruption. Second, mandatory enforcement of protection agreements for all member species. Third, establishment of a permanent security force that can actually protect members from aggression, not just talk about it. He looked around the chamber. But more than any of this, we want the galaxy to understand a simple truth. Humanity chose peace. We chose to join this council and follow galactic law. We chose to share our culture and science instead of our weapons. That was our gift to the galaxy. When you rejected our warnings and failed to protect us, you forced us to remember what we had tried to forget. You made us become what we spent centuries learning not to be. President Dong-Hyun's voice came through the communication system, broadcast to the entire council. This is President Dong-Hyun of Earth. Let me be clear about humanity's position going forward. We will not be ignored again. We will not trust our safety to a council that cannot enforce its own laws. We will maintain a military force capable of defending all our colonies and interests. And if any species attacks our people again, we will respond with the same efficiency we showed against the Vrothians. He paused, and his next words carried weight that made every delegate in the chamber feel cold. But understand this, we do not want to be warriors. We do not glory in combat or seek conquest. We want to return to being scientists, artists, farmers, and explorers. The choice of whether we can do that is yours. Attack us and you will face what the Vrothians faced. Leave us in peace and we will be the best neighbors the galaxy has ever known. The decision is entirely in your hands. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some species called for restrictions on human military power. Others demanded that humans be given permanent,